defend to the last man. In the final days of Hitler's Reich, as Soviet artillery turned Berlin into rubble, the man who Hitler trusted with this command was Wilhelm Mohnke, a loyal SS officer, early Nazi Party member, survivor of Dunkirk, and one of the very last commanders inside the Führer bunker. But who was Mohnke really? A ruthless war criminal who escaped justice, or simply a soldier swept up in a collapsing empire? Wilhelm Mohnke was born on March 15, 1911, in Lübeck, Germany, a small port city with medieval roots. Like many young men of his generation, he came of age during the economic turmoil of the Weimar Republic. His path to prominence started early. In 1931, he joined the Nazi Party and quickly enlisted in the SS. At the time, the SS was still a paramilitary wing of Hitler's movement, more a political street-fighting force than the massive military machine it would become. By 1933, after Hitler seized power, Mohnke had become one of the original members of Hitler's elite Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, the unit created to serve as the Führer's personal bodyguard. This fact alone tells us much about his position. To be in the Leibstandarte wasn't just about military skill, it was about loyalty, ideological commitment, and personal trust. Mohnke would prove himself in all three. When the war began in September 1939, Mohnke was already an officer. His first major test came during the invasion of Poland. His unit, like many in the SS, was accused of atrocities against civilians. Whether he personally ordered such actions remains debated, but what is certain is that the Leibstandarte gained a reputation for brutality, something that would follow Mohnke throughout his career. After Poland came France. During the 1940 campaign, Mohnke commanded a motorized infantry battalion. It was here that one of the darkest stains on his record occurred. Following the fall of Dunkirk, reports surfaced of British prisoners of war being massacred by SS troops under his command at Wormhout. Around 80 men were executed, many locked in a barn and shot or blown up with grenades. The survivors later testified about the horror. While direct evidence tying Mohnke personally to the order has never been proven, his role as battalion commander means responsibility was unavoidable. After the war, British investigators tried to link him to the massacre, but legal barriers and lack of solid documentation meant Mohnke was never charged. Still, the shadow of Dunkirk haunted him. As the war expanded, Mohnke continued to rise. He commanded a regiment during Operation Barbarossa in 1941 as German forces stormed into the Soviet Union. Like so many SS officers, he found himself fighting not only a brutal enemy, but also a war that increasingly blurred the line between combat and atrocity. His men were involved in harsh reprisals against partisans and civilians. Mohnke himself was wounded multiple times, first in France, then again in Russia, yet each time he returned to duty. By 1943, he was one of the youngest men promoted to Brigade Führer, roughly equivalent to a brigadier general. His reputation within the SS was that of a tough, unflinching commander. He demanded loyalty and discipline, but he was also respected for sharing hardships with his men. Accounts from veterans suggest he wasn't a distant, aristocratic officer, but someone who fought and bled alongside his troops. That image only reinforced his bond with the Leibstandarte. By 1944, Mohnke was placed in charge of an entire division, the newly created SS division Hitlerjugend, composed largely of fanatical teenage recruits. However, his tenure there was brief, and by late 1944, he was reassigned. As Germany's military situation collapsed, Mohnke was transferred to command the defense of central Berlin. It was this final role that would define him forever. In April 1945, as Soviet armies encircled the capital, Mohnke was appointed commander of Battle Sector Zitadelle, the central district that included the Reich Chancellery and, most importantly, the Führer bunker. This made him one of the last officers directly responsible for defending Adolf Hitler. Imagine the scene: Berlin in ruins, Soviet artillery hammering the city, food and ammunition running out. Inside the bunker, Hitler raged and despaired, surrounded by loyalists and deluded fanatics. Mohnke's job was to hold the line, no matter the cost. He organised his remaining troops, around 2,000 men, a mix of SS, Volkssturm and Hitler Youth, into a desperate defence force. He set up strongpoints, deployed anti-tank weapons, and tried to maintain order even as everything around him collapsed. He was present in those infamous final days. He saw Hitler give his last orders. He witnessed Joseph Goebbels, his wife Magda, and their 6 children take their own lives in the bunker. He heard the news of Hitler's suicide on April 30th, 1945. For history, this makes Mohnke one of the key eyewitnesses to the end of the Third Reich. After Hitler's death, Mohnke attempted to break out of the Soviet encirclement with a group of bunker survivors, including Hitler's personal adjutant Otto Günsche and Martin Bormann. The plan was hopeless. They split into small groups, trying to slip through Soviet lines under the cover of darkness. Mohnke's group was eventually captured by the Red Army on May 2, 1945. Here, Mohnke's story takes another turn. The Soviets recognized his importance immediately. He was taken into custody, interrogated, and ultimately transported to Moscow. For years he was held in Soviet prisons, including the notorious Lubyanka. He was not put on trial at Nuremberg, despite British and American interest in his alleged war crimes. Instead, the Soviets used him as a source of information on the inner workings of the Nazi leadership. It wasn't until 1955, a full decade later, that Mohnke was released and allowed to return to West Germany. By then, he was in his mid-40s, with a ruined reputation but still alive, a rare fate for a man of his rank and role. Back in Germany, Mohnke lived quietly in Hamburg. Unlike many other former SS officers, he avoided public attention and never published memoirs. He worked in business, largely keeping to himself. When British authorities reopened investigations into the Wormhout massacre in the 1980s, Mohnke was questioned again. Survivors of the massacre demanded justice, but once more, prosecutors found insufficient evidence to bring formal charges. The case was eventually dropped. This legal ambiguity has left historians divided on Mohnke's legacy. Some argue he was a competent, battle-hardened commander who did what soldiers do, fight for their country regardless of cause. Others see him as a prime example of the Waffen-SS, a unit forged in ideology, guilty of atrocities, and loyal to Hitler until the bitter end. It's striking that Mohnke, who was present at both the beginning and the very end of the Nazi regime, managed to escape the gallows. He lived until 2001, dying at the age of 90. That longevity meant he became one of the last living links to Hitler's bunker. For decades, journalists and historians tried to interview him, but he consistently refused. The silence of Wilhelm Mohnke left a gap in our understanding of those final days, forcing us to rely on the accounts of others. His story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. What does it mean when a man accused of atrocities evades punishment? How much responsibility lies with commanders who may not have pulled the trigger, but oversaw units that did? And finally, how do we judge a life like Mohnke's, half shrouded in loyalty, half stained with blood? Wilhelm Mohnke's life is a mirror of the Third Reich itself, rising fast, burning brightly, and ending in rubble. From the early days of the SS to the last hours in Hitler's bunker, he was there at every stage. Yet his survival, his silence, and the unanswered questions around his war crimes leave us with a haunting reminder: history doesn't always deliver justice. What do you think? Was Mohnke a ruthless ideologue who deserved to stand trial, or just another soldier following orders in an impossible war? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into World War II history, don't forget to like the video, share it with others who love history, subscribe for more, and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next exploration into the past.